Good morning, good afternoon. I'm now Bissmeyer. I'm the local vice president with Viamedici, and I'm glad that you have time to meet with us. If you look at the news, sustainability has been an issue for quite some time, but in the last few weeks, there have been numerous articles that focused on sustainability around ESG, around forever chemicals, around um, digital product passport, battery product passport, uh, a whole host of environmental needs. And so that, with that, I'm very glad that we were able to partner with Sustain 360, who is addressing all of these issues, uh, from ESG to DPP to digital product passport, product passport, uh, and basically looking at scope 1, 2, and 3 reporting. Today, we're really going to focus in on the DPP side. Not getting into the details. I'm hearing an echo. I don't know if there's a way to minimize the echo. So ultimately, what we're looking at is addressing these things. But before that, I'd like to get into a brief thumbnail and overview of who Viamedici is and what we are. So Viamedici is a software company that has been in business for 20 years, and we are a leader in the space. We do multi-domain master data management, we do product information management, and we do digital asset management and dynamic configuration. We're one of the only companies in the marketplace that actually do dynamic configuration in concert with product information management. We have over 400 customers, and we're growing very rapidly in the cloud business, over 100%. We've recently won a number of awards by analyst firms for our technical innovation and capabilities. There have been a number of write-ups. And we've also looked at what we've done from a peer review perspective in terms of customer feedback, and have consistently been rated as the highest, both in multi-domain master data management as well as product information management. One of the things we're very excited about is the fact that we have a 99.3% customer retention rate. We put a lot of effort and a lot of energy into our customers. And recently, last week, we had a customer event. It was called our Innovation Day, where we actually got together with a number of our global customers, and we sat down and looked at best practices. We shared new technology innovations that were taking place, and we shared and launched the new product that we have, which is EPIM 5, the latest release of our solution set. Now, I'm not going to go into great detail into this stuff. We're actually going to have a seminar series where we'll go into detail around our AI capabilities, our dynamic configuration. We'll actually talk about what we're doing with regards to domain experts. But I'll just touch upon these things very quickly. So we've been doing AI for quite some time, auto translation, localization through the use of AI, kind of working with categorization of product data and information. And we've actually enhanced our solution set with the 5.0 release to actually not only take advantage of what we do internally and what we do from a domain expertise perspective, but also how we capitalize and work with AI information from third parties. So we have an AI hub that we have and enhanced functionality that we built out. We're also doing domain experts. So we have the ability to actually have specific information that's pertinent to whether it be a product domain or a customer domain or a supplier, where you can actually use an AI chat capability to actually research and find a specific or appropriate product, a product for substitution, or a customer that's using a product, or be able to look at things as it pertains to a supplier and what suppliers are providing things. And we've done a whole new UI with regards to navigation and optimization. It's state of the art in terms of usability. I'll give you one screenshot here coming up. We've also done a lot of work with our configurator, which allows you to start your configuration anywhere and then make it available from an e-commerce perspective. So you're actually able to do framing with this configurator and bring information into an e-commerce application very easily. And we utilize a real-time data store which is another uniqueness with regards to our product set. We've enhanced that with the latest release of the product. Some of the other features that we explored last week were digital shelf optimization, both from an operational perspective as well as from an analytical perspective, as well as digital product passport and electronic product declarations, which we'll get into with Baz's discussion and the whole life cycle that's associated with that. This just gives you a quick view of the new look and feel of EPIM 5. So for those of you who are familiar with our previous interface, this you can see kind of this interface. And the thing that's interesting with this is you can see we're utilizing AI for auto text generation of specific product information, which will in turn be syndicated. So this is kind of looking at the PIM capabilities with regards to our solution set. These are some of our customers. I forgot to mention when we had our user group, one of the things that we did is we actually had a number of keynote speakers. And one of those keynote speakers was the COO of SAP, Vlad Tiger, who came in and actually talked about how Viamedici works in concert with SAP and how we optimize SAP. We actually, within our customers, I would say that probably 80% of our customers, a little bit more, have SAP as a back end. And the other thing that many of our global customers do is they deal with 30 to 40 languages in terms of what they're localizing in terms of language information. And so that gives you a feel. As you can see, they come from a number of different industries. We do building supply, building construction. We have medical and pharma companies. We have electrical and high-tech companies. We have biomedical companies that utilize our stuff on a global basis. And it was very exciting to have everybody in-house last week to actually be able to talk about their use of this from that perspective. From an MDM perspective, one of the things we do is we actually manage all of the product data and we have it available so that you can have an explosion and look within a hierarchy and how these things interrelate with each other. So you have the ability to actually tie in product data, supplier data, customer data, and based on feedback that has taken place, we're considered best in class in terms of these capabilities. This gives you a feel for our architecture, and I want to kind of hone in on two things. One thing I want to hone in on is the actual platform itself. So from a platforming perspective, what we have is we actually have the ability to visualize data as well as have information put into a database for syndication. We have a full workflow capability that allows you to actually maintain information as it's going through its workflow. I'm going to just escape out of this and use this. Sorry for the builds here. We have an ability to actually so this is our architecture. So we have a full workflow that allows you to actually look at the workflow of the information and what's taking place. We also have the ability to, and that can be either manual or automated. We manage all of your assets, all of your domain information, as well as all your syndication, whether it's going to external channels or whether it's going into internal applications bidirectionally. And then once information has been approved and put in for use, it is put into a in-memory data store that can be utilized and leveraged in real time and syndicate that information out to various appropriate parties. As you can see on the left-hand side, we have an app store, and the app store has a real-time integration into our application set. So in this instance, what we'll be doing is we'll be utilizing Sustain 360. And specifically what we'll be talking about today is Sustain 360 as it pertains to our product information management and the digital product passport and electronic product declarations. Those are the two major areas. But as Baz will point out, they are covering other components in terms of EPG, in terms of scope 1, 2, and 3, and being able to present that and manage that information within an MDM or master data management application set or our platform is something that we'll be doing over time and coming back and demonstrating in the future. So this this was actually a build, but what this is this actually shows the area that we'll be focusing on the PIM capabilities as well as the Sustain 360 capabilities. And the transition was ultimately that we have a green environment. So we have the ability to actually have our hosted center is green. It's been audited, and we are providing green in the spirit of sustainability. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Baz. I'd like to do a quick introduction. I met Baz over 2 decades ago, and at the time he was the chief architect for Emerson, and shortly thereafter he became the chief technology officer of one of their largest divisions, and was working in their data centers and trying to optimize energy use and looking at sustainability going back several decades. And so it's no surprise to me that Baz is the founder and CEO of Sustain 360. And with that, Baz, I'll turn it over to you.
Al, thank you very much. Great to meet everyone. Let me just present the slides here on my side. Just bear with me here. Present. Here. Okay, so say thank you very much for the opportunity. Great working with the Viamedici team, and how they fit in with Sustain 360. I hope at the end of this webinar is pretty obvious as to why two parties have come together. So just step back a little bit with those who are kind of just learning about this area in terms of sustainability. A couple of sort of background slides of just level setting. I have a kind of 3-pronged slides where I say what's going on with climate change. This is not a fact-based view, which effectively says that if you look at industrialization and the warming as a result of burning fossil fuels, the temperatures have risen. That obviously has a direct relationship in terms of the average daily temperatures, which are above 1.5 C in 2023. That's the second sort of wheel here. And the net result of these two factors is that obviously we've got a warming planet driven by human-driven climate change, and that results in impact in the sea ice and increasing so sea temperatures and increasing sea levels. So it's kind of a vicious circle here. It's going to feed itself. So that's just level setting in just very simple fact-based approach to what's actually going on. Some of the responses to that, one approach which was put together in about the 2015 range, or maybe even earlier, was the United Nations went and put together the ESGs, environmental sustainability goals. About half of them are related to the environment, and then there's an overlap with others with the social side of things. All good practice. A lot of companies, Fortune 100 companies, have adopted them and have corporate sustainability objectives and reports published on an annual basis. Another response, which is taking traction, is moving from what I call a linear approach. I've implemented a number of ERP systems in my career, and it was always kind of source the material, make the product, ship the product. And so that's kind of a linear approach. You really don't think too much about the consumption of that product and the use of that product, and then the recycling of that product once it's left the factory. So take my laptop here. When I bought it, am I aware of what to do with that e-waste? Once I've want another model of this particular laptop, I'm not really aware of what is the retailer where I bought it from, got some incentive to sort of say, I'll take that back, maybe give me a credit against the new one I buy. Not really in there. So there's a move now to around circularity, and there's two constructs within that. And circularity, obviously, so you're looking at sourcing material, raw materials sustainably. You're then manufacturing those with minimum waste and recyclability in mind continuously, and reducing environmental impacts as you're manufacturing and transporting. And then when you distribute, and the consumer or end consumer buys your product, they are fully aware of what to do with that product and how to recycle it and where the waste, and possibly coming back into the manufacturing cycle, so that the original manufacturer of the product maybe can get back the material and reuse it for the next generation of products. So that's kind of circularity. There's an ISO standard around this now. The methodology, as you'll see later, which has been adopted in this space, is called LCA, lifecycle assessment. If you're not familiar with them, you may want to look up. And it's really looking at an end-to-end, what we call cradle to grave view of your product value chain. Another approach, which is the Paris Agreement, was to define what is an emission, and really focused on carbon emissions. Again, those are not aware, and there's a lot of people not aware of this, is scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. And well, what does that all mean? And there's a lot of definition and mathematical calculations around it. In summary, what it means is that when you're driving a car, obviously you're consuming, and let's assume it's a combustion engine there, the tailpipe emissions out of there are, as you're driving, are direct emissions. As you go and fill the car up, and you go to the gas station to fill the car up, well, the gas which you're filling into your gas tank is effectively an indirect emission, because you're buying the fuel from the gas station. So it's scope 2. But how the gas then got to the petrol station is an entire supply chain which made it happen. And from the extraction of that oil to the processing, the petrol processing, the refinery, then the distribution, what we call upstream, midstream, downstream, and then retail in the oil and gas industry, that is scope 3. And so data shows that 70% of all emissions are in your scope 3 area. It's also related to the use of that material by your customers. Yeah, it's also scope 3. So that's a kind of, and if you look at what's been going on, most companies have done a very good job on Fortune 100 getting their arms around scope 1 and scope 2, and it's got energy consumption, and then having a strategy towards renewables, from fossil-based fuels to renewable fuels, so to get to a kind of a net zero on that in the future, 2030 or 2035. So a lot of announcements and good work being done on scope 1 and 2. But scope 3 is really the elephant in the room, where we still need a significant amount of work to be done. So what we've done, Sustain 360. Sustain 360 started out of the gate and said, let's tackle the elephant in the room. Let's look at scope 3. We focused on scope 3. We can do scope 1 and 2, absolutely, but our true north is to help companies grapple their scope 3 emissions and measure them, report them, and reduce them from an environmental perspective. And to do that, we have ESG modules in our software, which allow you to report your environmental footprint, so from a carbon perspective to customers to regulators, very basic stuff to go do that. But that then gives you the baseline to take action, and that action is circularity. If you didn't have Sustain 360, you would buy another module to do that, another software package, or maybe Excel, and you're really modeling circularity of your products, as I mentioned earlier, around cradle to grave. And so how do you now reduce your impact and model that out from your baseline, which is in your ESG? So that's what circularity. When you do that, you got to look at that from a risk perspective. And what we're doing in the future release is bringing out a climate risk module, which allows you to look at risk because of changes in your material and your supply chain, to adopt the new method of reducing carbon or environmental impacts. So that's what Sustain 360's module is. Not easy. Scope 3 is a data challenge. It's not a big data challenge in terms of volumes of petabytes of databases or something. It's really a case of disparate data in different places, and it's not connected. And so how do you get to silo data sets across your enterprise and outside of your enterprise and connect that data set? Second thing is looking at performance from a climate perspective, but also from a financial perspective, and benchmarking and comparing different materials, different processes, different methods of transportation, for example. So how do you do that benchmarking and comparison? And that's not easy to do unless you're using a lot of Excel. So we've allowed you to do that. And then those two things, when you brought them together, can allow you to report your progress to the board, to your chief sustainability officers, and to the market around meeting climate and regulatory needs. So that's how this all fits together. Now, when you've got all that data, and you'll see in a bit that there is, the data is there, it's just disjointed, and you bring that together, it allows an opportunity to future-proof yourself from a regulation in the EU, which is in draft, and it's going to be published in terms of what they call EcoDesign. So this is looking at a product end to end, and having a circularity around it, promoting sustainability for greater durability, reusability, and circularity of that manufactured product. But it's digital because you've got evidence. Well, if you're going to have evidence and you're going to digitize things like a digital twin of a product from a sustainability lens, what do we need to bring together? We need to bring together product information. Well, Viamedici, you could see Al saying 400 customers, deep integration with ERP systems, have really brought all that information and data together in their EPIM solution or various stages of EPIM implementations. So there's a place you can go to for product information. You've got a place where you can get bring that data into sustainable lens, so they can look at it from a sustainability perspective through Sustain 360. Here's where we think the future lies in terms of ensuring that we don't have greenwashing, that we are not misleading the consumer with over marketing of the potential of our greenness or our products, when the reality is something else. And so how do we give evidence and confidence? And so by embedding a blockchain in here around the data payload, that allows it to give us evidence that this has been done ethically, morally, and can be validated independently that the data is accurate and trusted. So that's our view of Digital Product Passport. Obviously, you need to bring the data together. EPIM is a source. You need to glue that data together and then present that in Sustain 360, which is what I'll demonstrate next. So let me just go through the demonstration here. So let me go through a journey here. I hope you could see my screen. Let me go. Firstly, the e-commerce site. So this is where the consumer is interacting. And if you're online right now and you scan that QR code, you'll actually get a digital product passport for this power drill. Okay. So you're interacting from an e-commerce perspective on a site. You've got some evidence, an eco score, a rating, and a QR code, which is giving you the evidence that this has got a rating of 2.98 and a BB. Well, what does that mean? What does the evidence? You can go scan that, and you can do that real time if you want, and that should come up. Well, how have we put this? How has Viamedici been able to put this e-commerce experience on the site? So I go to Viamedici now, and I'm in EPIM now, and you could see the hierarchy of that drill down to its sub-assemblies, down to its suppliers, down to the markets it's being used, the factories where manufacturing is occurring, and all the componentry and all the assets. If I go into the components, you could see the screws, the wires, the magnets. That is in your bill of materials, in your bill of material routings, and you brought that data, most of that data into EPIM, or if you haven't, then it's pretty straightforward because EPIM is connected into your ERP systems as a single source of truth around the product hierarchies and standardization of metrics. So have we got the right unit measures, the right currencies, right values, well, MDM and EPIM can ensure that the quality of the data, the accuracy of the data is there. So that's how, from an e-commerce site, the publication of that information is occurring through EPIM into the e-commerce site. And this is a representation of that drill and the hierarchy within it. So you're all asking yourself, well, hopefully, well, how do you get the sustainability lens into this? So what do? Al mentioned earlier, there's an integration between Sustain 360 and EPIM. We've built that. That extract and integration, the API, allows us to push data from EPIM into Sustain 360. And this is all real. This is not mock-up. This is real information we're showing. Is a visualization through a canvas of a knowledge graph, which allows you to depict the asset, which is in this case the power drill, the scopes, remember those, we mentioned those earlier, in terms of the Paris Agreement definition of scope 2 and scope 3 in this case, all the submaterials within there, the battery, the drill bits, and the motor housing, the battery, lithium battery, the drill switch, the motor, and so on, and its submaterial, all represented down here. And here's the beauty of this. So you could take this down to a chemical level, so a molecule level, and you could see here that we've taken a plastic, and I believe there's another plastic here as well, and we brought that down, and we could take that material, we can go to another database, and we can then decompose that down to a chemical structure. So you can look at that chemical structure and then go against another database, which is from the EPA and the natural NIST as well, which has got a category of databases or data sources which say whether they are forever chemicals at the molecule level. And if it's a forever chemical, then this will be flagged and it's identified there. It won't have a blue mark around it. It'll have a red marking because it has been identified as a potential forever chemical. So you can actually go down to the molecule level within this. But that gives you the level of granularity in detail. And these lines and mappings and relationships, see them as carbon pathways or environmental pathways between producers and consumers of carbon. When you built the knowledge graph and the relationships, which is basically your bill of materials being brought in from EPIM, we then allow you to build a bunch of dashboards. And in this case, we've got a dashboard which allows you to visualize the global warming potential by scopes. And we don't just do it for global warming, but we don't just do it for carbon. So if you want to look at this from another metric, let's say you want to look at it from a toxicity perspective, then what is the toxicity of that product? And you can see here that by scope and total, you've got the toxicity. So you got not just the carbon lens, but you got a biodiversity lens of that. You can then explore and interact and look at how things were calculated. So if I look at that motor housing, how was that calculated? What was the carbon rating for it? I mentioned this eco score, which is effectively an aggregate of all those metrics, which I showed you earlier. And there's a kind of a rating against it, so it makes it easier for an end customer to understand. And then you get all the details around how that motor housing has been brought in. So you can explore the relationships. And then if you look at it from a more granular level, and you say, well, hold on, you've got all this information around the suppliers and supply chain. Well, how can we visualize the supply chain? And so you can go in, because we've pulled in the suppliers and the supplier metrics, we can look at it and say that, well, where's that battery coming from? That battery, we know that. We know the information that the battery is coming from China. What route did it took? We know that from the ERP systems. We brought that data in and effectively calculated its distance, and for an individual battery, calculated its carbon footprint. So we can actually look at and decompose the supply chain environmental impact. We generate reports to visualize all the relationships which you saw in the knowledge graph earlier. And they just take a little bit of time to load here as this comes up. But effectively, you'll have a report which shows you the digital product passport. I'll cover this in more detail in a minute. All the information around it down to the chemical level. You've got all the information around the emission reports, and you've got here that circularity view from cradle to gate. So we didn't have cradle to grave information in this case, but we got cradle to grave. So you got both sustainability information, plus also you've got scope information in terms of emissions. That's in Sustain 360. But if I then pivot now, and you can see there is a blockchain for this data payload. Okay, there's an alpha build, a blockchain. There's a tick mark that all this data resides in a blockchain ledger. Again, if you wanted to scan that, you can see the digital product passport. So this gives you a Sustain 360 is providing all the modeling, the sustainable metrics, the reporting, and what happens with that information is that we then provide that as another API from Sustain 360 back into EPIM. So see us as an engine within Viamedici's EPIM product set. As Al said, we're effectively looking at this as a plugin. And what happens here, just those reports I just showed you earlier, and now displayed, and there's our digital product passport. We talked about having a blockchain against it. There's this carbon footprint. There's this eco score, and it's all ratings against all those metrics, environmental impact metrics, and overall rating by component, what the emissions are. Then each component has its breakdown and rating, calculation of environmental impact down to the molecule level. So hopefully that shows you that we send back the information back into EPIM, and so the dashboards and analytics can be visualized as a kind of approach to seeing your information, your sustainability information. And obviously this information is also available through that QR code, which is on the e-commerce side. And also, we can also represent carbon information if we wanted to do that. So here's the lifecycle state, LCA, the lifecycle assessment report, which is visualized in the product. And hopefully that gives you a good kind of tour of the software here. And now you may be skeptical about whether we really have a blockchain and whether this is genuine in where we're at. I'm going to now in real time show you that there is a token associated with this. So if I go here, I just have to do this in a different browser, and I bring up
Hi, Baz. I'd like to just remind the audience that they can certainly put any questions into the session if there's any questions that come up, because I've noticed that there hasn't been much questioning coming from folks, and I know that there are questions. So feel free to put the questions into the LinkedIn session. Sorry for the interruption there.
No problems at all. Thanks, Al. And he just gave me the time to find the actual extension, which is the wallet. So just to finish this off, you can see there is a wallet here. If I go into the AlphaBuild wallet here, and I look at the digital product passport for that power drill, we associated that multiple keys were generated. The one which is relevant right now is that particular one, and that is the one which is effectively represented on the digital product passport report I showed earlier. So hopefully that sort of Al and the team brings together, the kind of demonstration of how EPIM, Sustain 360 interoperate with each other to create this experience around sustainability and environmental footprint. In terms of next steps, how do get clients get started? Well, if you're looking at the journey towards sustainability, assessing the impact of regulations such as the EcoDesign directives, which have been planned. And let's look at those, evaluate the maturity, the quality of the data within EPIM and the product data sets which is required. You could then scope out, prioritize products and projects which are required. Customers can get started immediately in terms of if they need to produce environmental product declaration sheets. So that's kind of a stepping stone towards a digital product passport, in my view. So as I showed you earlier, there was a life cycle assessment created for that power drill. So that power drill's life cycle assessment can Sustain 360 generates an environmental product declaration sheet, which is effectively the information you have to share with your customers or with the regulators around the environmental impact. So Sustain 360 does create EPDs as well. And so that's a immediate starting step, and that's a step towards digital product passports. Then the sort of scope out and implement this in a sort of pilot and scale this out as you go forward. So with that, I think Al, any questions or any information?
Yeah, I've had a few questions that have come in. I mean, one question that was brought up is, I just saw another one that came up as well. Yes, so Sustain 360 is integrated with Viamedici EPIM. As Baz just showed, we're doing a handshaking back and forth. We actually have the bill of material information that we sent to Sustain 360, and then in turn, they do the computation, the assessment, and then they send that information back into Viamedici's EPIM system within the hierarchy. And then from the hierarchy, we actually have all the product information available along with the reports themselves. And then you can syndicate that information out to the channels that require it. Actually, I don't know. Baz, did you show the e-commerce preview? I don't know if that was.
I did. I showed the e-commerce preview.
Okay.
Yeah, it did show that. That yeah, absolutely.
So we can do an e-commerce preview. We can also do a print preview. You can actually create a PDF and send that information out. And so one of the things that's interesting in this whole thing that we've actually talked about is if you look at a number of the companies that are looking at digital product passport, and we didn't even get into the specifications of the time frames when this stuff will be required, but they're actually looking at the creation of an RFID tag in concert with product information. And one of the things that's different in terms of our approach and the things that we're doing is, as Baz has pointed out, is we're actually utilizing blockchain to actually do the stamping of that data and then a QR code so that you'll actually have the ability to go back and view what's going on with that specific product without having to have an RFID associated with it. And actually that product data will be available and maintained within EPIM for syndication to any of the, whether it's direct to a retailer or, e-commerce application or a marketplace or wherever it happens to go. So the answer to that question is yes. I had another question that was basically, what customers are we working with? And there are several customers. I don't think we're in a position to actually name names, but we have about 4 companies that are current Viamedici customers that are working with us on this initiative and at various stages. And not only that, it was very well received last week where there were some new ones that wanted to get involved with us as well. So this is actually on everyone's radar, as I mentioned. And what we've really covered today has been around the digital product passport and the EPD, essentially. But in the future, we'll actually be looking more at ESG and sustainability and utilization of master data management and our full suite with hierarchies and information that's associated with that. So that's another thing. I had another question that came in that was actually interesting, and it's not really about sustainability, but I think it actually applies to blockchain. And they said, what would blockchain have for other industries potentially? And so I think there's a whole host of things that could come up, and I don't want to deviate from our sustainability discussion, but certainly blockchain allows you to look at, you know, companies or products that could potentially be in the gray market and actually have a stamping of that information and validation of that information and utilized in concert with the PIM application, more from an operational perspective, getting it to the digital shelf. So that was another question that came up. Are there other ones that people have? Certainly feel free to write them in, and we'll be happy to address them. Well, wait a second here. Additionally, I'd like to apologize for my screen progressing. It threw me off a little bit there. I worked on the presentation on the flight over from Europe last week, or last night, I should say, and I turned it off, but it must have turned itself back on. So apologies for that. It threw me off a little bit. But one of the things I did want to mention at the beginning when I was talking about the energy that's behind sustainability is that the analyst firms have been really pushing sustainability as well. Gartner views it as in their top 3 priorities, and a number of other groups that have come up and noted the importance of sustainability in the reporting and the application sets that are utilizing this.
It's just a kind of couple of things to add to what Al said. On the data side, if you remember, the key message was that 70% of all emissions are in your supply chain and the use of your products, and so it's a data problem. You know, it's obviously an environmental problem, but to fix the environmental problem, you got to get the data. And so Viamedici and the implementation of Viamedici's EPIM solution becomes a fantastic stepping stone. Okay, a repository of good data, clean data, to feed into Sustain 360 as an engine, which embedded in there to push back to you know, your usage of your products with a sustainability lens. And so I think that is a kind of key point around getting the data in. The other thing about that, which I didn't mention, was that within Sustain 360, I mentioned it on the Viamedici side, there is a significant amount of AI. When I brought up the knowledge graph, and those things were in scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3, and scope 2 and scope 3 in terms of the drill, that is automatically classified. And then there's the classification of those metrics, the sustainability metrics, there's 12 of them. How is that calculated? Again, that is an automated mechanism for doing that. So what AI is doing is effectively, what I call AI for good, effectively is complementing the automation of those metrics so they can be easily done and reported, so they can have the speed at which you can provide the information back to your clients. There's another question there.
Yeah, there were 2 other questions. One question that came up is this topic something that comes up in the U.S. as much as Europe? And I'll take my crack at it, and then I'll defer to Baz because he's much more knowledgeable than me. But I think we're seeing a few things. So California is actually ahead of Europe in a number of areas, which is kind of surprising. They're doing scope 3. They're focusing in on, you know, full traceability. You know, really a major push. But most of Europe is obviously much ahead of the U.S. in terms of this being a need. In terms of DPP, interestingly enough, the fashion industry and the battery industries are the 2 industries that are doing things most immediately, and then I think electrical will follow that. And so a number of the battery groups are actually looking at doing pilots into this year, as well as some of the fashion companies have committed to doing some things this year. And then other companies are preparing to get ahead in the future. But I think another thing that we're seeing a lot too, and it was raised in the Wall Street Journal article, is not just looking at CO2, but looking at the forever chemicals and the composition of those chemicals in products. And so that's a reporting thing that's required. And that's something that Sustain 360 does, and something that we will be able to capitalize on as part of our product information, both from an MDM and PIM perspective. So I'll turn it over to you, Baz, because you know a lot more about Europe versus US, but that's my quick thumbnail on it.
Yeah, so Europe is ahead from a number of perspectives, both from an kind of the emission side, but also the offset side in terms of exchanges which are in place there. So they're kind of a major push there with the EU there, and some of the regulation which has been implemented. And you say this regulation around EcoDesign into products, which is pending, and then digital product passports is again further ahead. But what you are seeing here in the US, as Al pointed out, the California climate bill, which was published, I think, in October, November last year, really was more stringent than anything which is in Europe, because he actually put a lot of emphasis not just on 1 and 2, but on scope 3. The European legislation is still more scope 1, 2 sort of focused and moving towards scope 3. But we saw clear evidence in my view, what I saw is in the California bill, and then also climate risk. So it's actually made a bigger emphasis on climate risk. So we're seeing sort of Europe ahead, but to say what happened in, just to echo what Al said, what was in California with the climate bill, sort of getting up there in terms of what's required. Okay. Any other questions?
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, with that, first of all, we will share this in terms of a YouTube video so that people can access it after the fact. We'll also, as I mentioned, be having a webinar series around a number of different capabilities and functionality that Viamedici has released with the 5.0 release, and getting into topics around configuration and digital shelf and AI and its utilization, as well as domain experts, as well as in the future, we hope to have 360 back to talk about scope 3 specifically, as well as 2 in EPG and our MDM solution set, because we think that'll be kind of like the next wave. I think initially, as Baz has pointed out, a number of our customers are looking at EPP and digital product passport as kind of like the first 2 steps, but then they will be expanding that and looking at forever chemicals, looking at EPG reporting, looking at other traceability aspects within their organization, and kind of what's going on within the whole supply chain with regards to scope 3 reporting, which is actually coming along very quickly for both Europe as well as the US. And with that, we have our contact information up here. You should be able to scan these QR codes to get to Sustain 360 or to Viamedici, or if you'd like to get to my contact information on LinkedIn, you can scan this as well as Baz's. Both the QR codes are listed there. Feel free to visit our website, visit the Viamedici and Sustain 360 LinkedIn sites and websites for more information. Happy to answer any questions you have after the fact. Get with us directly or access the information. We definitely appreciate your time today. I certainly appreciate your time as well, Baz. So
thank you.
Any other comments, Baz, from your perspective?
No, I appreciate the opportunity, Al. Thank you so much, and the Viamedici team for supporting Sustain 360 and the integration and the value we can bring to our clients, and make a reduced carbon footprint for everything we're producing in the future. And I think this is the first journey in multiple steps as we work together in producing a roadmap of solutions together. So I appreciate all the support, and thank you very much.
Thank you all. Have a great day. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.